When it comes to whole life insurance, it is probably the most debated product in the financial services marketplace, period. And the reason why is that there's so much misinformation on it. What I mean when I say most debated is you'll find both consumers and people in the business fight with each other, get at each other's throats about it being the absolute best product in the world or the absolute worst product in the world. It's a ripoff, stay away from it. And if you've done any research, you know that already. So I was working on a number of things and just kind of thought to myself, why is that? And if someone asked me the question, I would give a number of answers. It often has to do with agents, how the commission works, has a lot to do with training. But I really want to break this down a bit today. So I wanted to shoot this video particularly on this topic because I think it's important, and our company's mission statement is really to provide transparency and convenience to consumers on whole life insurance with a specific focus in green there on the cash value. That's what our company does, both of our companies, ILS and IBC Global. So what I really want to touch on today is first, how agents are trained, because how the industry is actually trained has a huge bearing on what the consumer is actually going to see when it comes to a whole life insurance product. The thing is, with a whole life insurance policy, I can sell you one whole life insurance policy where you put in any amount of money, say it's $1, and you see the majority of that dollar in cash value immediately. You look at it and say, hey, wow, this is fantastic. I get the majority of my money right off the bat. I see positive appreciation very early on. I can use the money anytime I want. This is fantastic. But then I can take that same whole life insurance policy with the same company, you pay in the same dollar, and you say that this thing is just ugly. There's no way I'm going to put money into this thing. And the thing is, it really has to do with me, the agent. When you decided to pay that dollar into a policy, I elected to direct that dollar toward the insurance premium or directly toward riders that go into the cash value, which is your benefit from day one. And how I elect to do that, where I decide to put that money, has a direct impact on my compensation, no matter how I slice it. So that's often where an issue pops up. But what I want to touch on first is how agents are trained. And some of it's going to be factual. More of it's going to be what my friend Elizabeth refers to, a culture in the industry. And she, when I spoke with her, Elizabeth Morgan, she's a phenomenal tax attorney and estate planning attorney, and I admire her and her firm very much. But the first time I met her, she said something that stuck with me. She says a lot of things that just stick in my mind, but she said, when you look at insurance agents and what goes on in the industry, there is almost a culture that she strongly dislikes. And when she said it, why it stuck with me and why I was immediately attracted to working with her and her firm is because I felt that being in the industry, especially when I first started. So as an agent, when you first get into the business, if you're a consumer watching this or interested in a policy, you'll know what to look out for, or you'll have a good sense of how we're trained. If you're an agent in the business, this may speak directly to you. Is when I first got into the industry, it was 100% about the premium production. It's all about the premium. And with a whole life insurance policy, your money can go toward premium or toward what is called a PUA rider. Premium buys life insurance and drives compensation. That drives revenue for the company, for the agent. That is the commission. It also creates bragging rights. You'll often find in different brokerage firms, different agencies, different insurance companies, there's always recognition for the guys and girls that are writing the most premium, which really incentivizes agents, one, monetarily, and then two, just from call it a recognition or ego standpoint of, hey, if I write the most premium, my name's at the top and I'm recognized as the best. And I've never liked that kind of stuff, and it's a big reason I decided to go independent. But the premium drives compensation. It also creates bragging rights. So from a culture standpoint, when Elizabeth said that, I'm like, okay, she's right, 100%. And she's not in the industry, which is why I was impressed. She's got a good way of reading people. But the thing is, when it comes to whole life insurance, I talked about specific focus on cash value. That's what our company does. Everyone we work with that is interested in whole life insurance policies, they're interested in the cash value. That's why they're deciding to open up a policy. Thing is, when you take the premium piece, which drives compensation, which drives the bragging rights, the recognition, that does not build cash value for the consumer. In order to really maximize the cash value for the consumer, guess what you have to do? You have to minimize the premium as much as possible and get as much money as possible toward other riders, which gives the policyholder as much money from day one and long-term in cash value. Especially that's true when you look at the guarantees. So I'll give you a little story on this. Before I do that, I've mentioned that my background, where I learned a lot of the technical pieces of whole life insurance, was designing policies as a case designer, designing policies for corporations. And I had access, I'm very fortunate that I had access to executives at home offices of some of the major mutual companies that actually disclosed as far as how the software is written when you actually run illustrations, how the formulas are applied to base premium dollars, PUA dollars. We looked at a ton of actual performance. That is so important. Actual performance that's almost never shown in the industry, not an illustration that projects these values over time, but what actually happens. And I've talked about it a million times, but when I was at that firm as a designer, that stuff was harped on so much because you're working with corporations that are putting big dollar amounts into policies, huge amounts. So they would ask those questions, and if they didn't, we would ask it for them. I'll rephrase. When I was a designer, I was never in the sales meetings. I was the back office guy. The owner of the firm was in the sales meetings. He would come back. We'd work on the case together. I'd run 18 million models for the company that we would actually present to him, or the company would. I was the back office guy putting it all together. And I love that. I still design policies today with everyone I work with because I can't stop. I like it too much. But when I first got into the business, I struggled, to say the least. I got into the business at age 23, and the first year I made about $5,500. The next 2 years I made $8,000, $8,500, and I'm struggling big time, to say the least. I still lived at home, but I remember one evening I'm driving and I'm stressed out of my mind. I was dating Tara at the time, who's my wife today. And when we were dating, we talked about getting married, or said, hey, maybe after we date for 2 years, that'd be a good time to get married. We agreed on that and couldn't do it. And, I could tell she was, internally, I don't want to say devastated, but she was, expecting after 2 years that, hey, I might propose. And I let her know I'm not going to be able to do it. Like I wasn't making it in the industry. Almost failed out actually, but I didn't make any money. That's the way I could summarize it. But the reason why kind of goes back to that culture piece, where the industry wanted to push the premium all the time, sell the premium. That's how you make money, Steve. And you also, you'll be recognized as this big time producer. And I couldn't do it. I'm not going to do that. Like, people want whole life insurance for high cash value. That's why they're doing it. So back to the story. I'm stressed out of my mind. I was dating Tara at the time. One evening I'm driving and I typed out a text message to my friend who had owned a business. His name was John. And the message read something along the lines of, John, you think I could pick up some work with you? And I was broke. I had like a few dollars in my bank account. My credit cards were maxed out. It was a struggle. I'm not going to lie. And I was, about to give up. I didn't hit send. And I'm really glad that I didn't send that text message, because what would have happened is, I don't want to say John definitely would have helped out, but he probably would have helped out. I would have ended up working for him on the side. I would have ended up doing it full time. And this business, my career in the life insurance and financial services industry, would have just flew away in the wind. Like, it would not have amounted to anything. So I didn't hit send. And it was partly because I was stubborn. Not gonna lie. There's a couple things that drove my stubbornness. The first was at one point I had a boss who flat out told me and other people at his firm that if you can't make it with me, you can't make it in the industry. Meaning, if you don't make it with me as your boss, me selling for you and doing everything here, you're not gonna make it. Which that, I didn't like hearing that one bit. And the second thing that kind of drove my stubbornness, if you want to call it that, I don't like to say I'm a stubborn person, but sometimes I find myself and people find me being stubborn. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, and I try and work on it. But the second thing was actually my pops, which we've got a good relationship today. But my dad, he had said it to a friend of mine, and my friend told me this, that Steve's got to get out of this industry and this business that he's trying to do. He can barely, or he hasn't been able to replace the tires in his car. Like his tires are bald because he knew I didn't have any money. I was struggling. I still lived under his roof at home because I was trying to get things going. So he knew what was going on. But when I heard that, I'm like, no, I'm going to make sure I make it no matter what. Otherwise, I'm going to hear about it for the rest of my life. And again, we've got a good relationship today. So that was definitely some motivation, you can call it, which, I like to always focus on the positives. That's not meant to be negative one bit. But as time passed, trying to make it in the industry, I had some struggles that I knew I had to overcome. If I were to look at my specific struggles, there were three of them really. The first was that I was a horrible presenter. What I mean when I say horrible presenter is I used to sweat before I even made a phone call to someone. I couldn't do it. Like I would just sweat. I would envision, what are they going to say? What if they ask me something I didn't know? I could feel my chest just pounding. Like I couldn't make the phone call to people. And then forget about presenting to people. Like I would just choke on my own words all the time. Wasn't good. I couldn't present to people at all. The second, I didn't have people to talk to. In the business, you have to typically find people to talk to. You're not provided leads, meaning I don't go work for someone. They say, hey, call this person and try and set an appointment with him, or he or she is interested in cash value life insurance. Do your thing. It doesn't work like that. You have to go out, typically to friends and family, try to get them to agree to a meeting with you, and then explain a whole life insurance product, which they've likely heard bad things about, try and convince them why it's great and why they should pay money into it. Yeah, not that easy. So I didn't have people to talk to. That was the second thing. And then the third thing, anytime I did get a sale, because my goal was what? Kind of going back to the culture thing, not to be part of that culture, maximizing the cash value for the consumer. When you do that in the industry, what does that mean with respect to your commission? It's the absolute minimum. So I smile when I think about it today, and if I were to do it all over again, I would do the exact same thing because it's about the consumer. And I had to tell myself that a million times because the temptation came in, especially when I see everyone around me doing it. There was, let me touch on that point actually. When I say I saw everyone around me doing it, what I mean when I say that is all of my peers, my competitors, they could sell a whole life insurance policy with a client paying the same amount of money into a product, and they would make anywhere between 3 and 10 times the amount of money I would, because I'd set it up where it's minimum compensation, because that gave the consumer the most money from day one over the life of the policy. They love the product. They were happy with it. They were happy with me. I could sleep at night. So to give some visuals there, let me just touch on this quick. All right, here's an example. This was actually this is a sample of a story that I like to talk about sometimes. When I was working for someone else, there's a day a doctor walked into the office and he met with the owner of the firm and another senior agent there. And the doctor wants to pay $100,000 per year into a life insurance policy. The doctor's goal, however, is to take out a policy designed for maximum cash value. That's what he wanted. He said, hey, I'm interested in the cash value. That's what I want. He was sold this. Now, these illustrations can be difficult to follow. So all I want to touch on is here's his payment. I'm going to put this in red. Net premium, $100,000 per year. Here's his net cash value, year one, a little better than zero, $3,600. It's a $100,000 loss, $97,000 loss if you want to be accurate. Pays in for 10 years, total of $1 million. What's his cash value at year 10? $970,000. The $30,000 loss by year 10. That's not counting the opportunity cost all these years. By year 11, he finally has more than what he's paid in. Like, this is a huge, huge issue with whole life insurance and why people just feel taken advantage of, where I come in and say, I want maximum cash value, and I'm sold this. And this guy pays at a minimum right here, or at least with that group where I used to work with, or where I used to work, $85,000 in the compensation. I'm not saying it's bad from a compensation standpoint or agents are bad for making money, but if a consumer has a specific objective, maximum cash value, and I don't do that for them, then it's like you can't do that kind of stuff. That's messed up, man. Look at this, same policy, $100,000 going in, almost 50% right off the bat. Much better than the last one, but it's still not that great. If I look at this guy, by year 8, I've paid in $800,000, and I have $800,000, a little bit more. So 8 years to get my money back. But then, this is how I would set them up and how we set them up today. And often you'll see more cash value than what you'll see in this example. There's the 100K payment. Look at this, 82% right off the bat. Positive, year 5. It's the same company, same product, same health rating, same assumptions. Everything's the same here, except for where the money's going. This guy is just a minimum premium, maximum amount of money possible going toward the cash value. My point to that is that complements, or that is the story where someone came in, this was a real life story, wanting a whole life insurance policy for cash value, and he was sold that first option, which didn't have any cash value, not in the beginning at least. And I remember the agent, the senior agent, and the owner of that firm talking, where the owner of the firm said, if you would have been in that meeting on your own, the premium would not have been as high, commissions would have been lower. Like, that was the focus. I'm like, dude, like that's not what the client wants. The focus is not on the client. You can say it is all you want, but if the client says, I want a policy for maximum cash value, and you don't do that, like, that's a problem right there. So that's the culture of the industry. I'm in there trying to sell policies for maximum cash value, which in turn minimize the compensation. So it makes it a bit harder. So I know this is a long-winded story. I hope I'm not too scattered here. But the issues I had were, again, what? Number one, I could not talk to people. I was a horrible communicator. I needed to practice that. Number two, didn't have people to talk to, right? I had to go try to solicit friends and family, which is not easy. And then number three, whenever I did sell a policy, was minimum commission. And I think I mentioned earlier that in the beginning, because I struggled for so long, I had a few dollars in my bank account. Many times it went negative. I was hit with overdraft charges and maxed out credit cards. So you could say it was a little stressful, to say the least. And the hardest part was letting Tara know that we're going to get married in 2 years, and it took about 3.5 years, but I love her very much, and she was extremely patient. So how I fixed that is, I'm going to touch on each of those 3 items, but how I fixed it is really 2 things I want to touch on. First is the advantage I had when I was going to fix it, is I knew whole life insurance quite well because I spent so much time on the software and just working at that firm, where we design executive benefit or policies for executives, for corporations. Like, I was able to learn a lot of the ins and outs, get a lot of industry insight, so much data on actual performance that, again, is never shown in the industry. That was my advantage. My disadvantage, lack of people to talk to, and I couldn't get that knowledge out. Like, when I'd speak to someone, if you're interested in a whole life insurance policy, I know how to design it for maximum cash value, but the confidence was not there. I'd explain it and you'd be like, I'm not working with this guy. This is like a kid that lives at home with his parents and can't talk, like he can't communicate it effectively. Like I don't believe him. That's the thing. At least that's how I viewed myself, which I could be wrong, but I wouldn't buy from me back then. So step number one, what I did, practice, 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 practice. No matter what the struggle was, my goal was to serve the client first. I always had it in my head and still do to this day. Simply, if you put the client first, everything else will fall in line. Pretty simple. Put the client first, everything works out. The money will come. Have you ever heard that saying? Do that. And I can speak from experience that has worked for our entire company. Everyone here, we continue to grow and we invest a lot into our employees, to our salespeople, so they have that same mentality. It's so important to do that. But put the customer first. Jeff Bezos, he stated something. I've listened to this a million times. He says, a big advantage Amazon has always had over their competition is that they have an obsessive, compulsive focus on the consumer, not their competition. Obsessive, compulsive focus on the consumer, not the competition. I'm not going to talk about competition today. Very quickly, when you look at this industry, every agent and even insurance company out there is more focused on their competition than they are in their consumer. I shouldn't say every client and company, but it's well over 98%. Like it's close to 100%. Talk to any agent and mention a competitor. If your agent that you're working with says, yeah, good things about the competition, and they get back to you, that means they don't have the mentality of focusing on competition. Usually what you'll hear if you mention a competitor is 18 million reasons why that competitor is horrible, why they're not the direction to go with, and they just fight with each other. Like, don't do that kind of stuff. It's the consumer that you should be focused on. Why do you think Amazon does so well? So, step number one, I said before I went on that rant there, practice. So what I mean with that is my communication skills were not great, and that's an understatement. They were horrible. So how I overcame that is really by practicing, and it started in my congregation. I would have assignments for short talks and longer public talks, and that was something that whenever I would deliver a talk, I wanted that to be the best it could possibly be. It's very important to get all of the material accurate from a messaging standpoint, but then also, if you've ever sat through a public talk, or if you've ever given one, let's say if you've ever sat through one, it's very, very important that you don't fall asleep, right? Have you ever been in school and you've got that boring teacher, Bueller, happens to all of us. But how do you not be Ben Stein? Ben Stein's a good guy. How do you not be Ben Stein and communicate effectively is the thing. So how you do that is really by practicing. I would see people who were very effective communicators, and I would copy a lot of what they did. What I first did whenever I had a public talk is I would write it out. If I had a 30-minute talk assignment, first I would type it out. Usually 95% of what I was going to say would be on paper, so it would be several pages. And then I would read through it, I'd adjust it, so I'd spent a fair amount of time on it. And then I would start to practice it. And a 30-minute talk, the first time I practice, it might be 40 to 45 minutes because I had a lot of extra stuff that I wanted to say, kind of like I'm doing in this video, throwing in all the extra things. But as I practiced, it continued to get better, closer to the 30-minute mark. But I'll let you know that the first talk I had, I practiced for about, it was more than 10 times. I think it was around 15 times. I can't remember the exact amount, but I just remember it was well over 10 times practicing it just at home, then going to the actual place where I was going to deliver the talk up on the podium, right? So you can actually have that live rehearsal, emphasizing the proper words, the proper points, getting the gestures in line. This way, everything from a communication standpoint was effective. You can connect with that audience more so on the main points that you want to than everything else. This way you keep the audience's attention, put them in the same place you are when you're actually delivering that message. So that was something that I practiced a lot, and one day thought, hey, if I can do that in my business, it would certainly help. So started doing that. So I mentioned earlier with whole life insurance policies, I knew them in and out. I had a lot of confidence when talking about whole life insurance, when talking in my head about whole life insurance, because I knew the software in and out. I knew how to model a policy, but again, I could not communicate it, just to make that point clear. So what I did was practice communicating it. Whenever I would design a policy in the software, I would start to do a screen recording. I would do a meeting with someone where I would practice each step explaining, here's how the policy works. I'll give you an example. Back to this illustration. Mr. Client, you've got your policy here where we've got $100,000 per year going into the policy. If I'm you, my question would be this. Of that $100,000, where is my money going, and how do I know if it is maximized for cash value? Where is your money going? So when you look at these illustrations, you'll find that there are two main areas where your money can go. The first area is the premium piece right here. We've got it at $10,000, which is 10% of your total desired payment. That premium piece is your true minimum commitment. So you've got the $10,000 premium. This does not build any cash value in the first year. The other area where you can allocate funds is what is called a PUA, stands for Paid Up Additions Rider. I often refer to this as a cash dump-in. You're throwing money right into your cash value. It does buy you some death benefit. You don't see 100% of that drop in cash value, but this is the key to accelerating the cash value from day one. So as we look at this guy, what you'll notice, you've got the $100K per year going in. Here you go, $100,000. This column, cumulative net after-tax outlay, will track your total payments over time, making it very easy to see when your break-even is. So for example, year one, you made the payment, net cash value, here's the money column, about 83, 82% right off the bat. So just to provide full transparency to you, Mr. Client, where people don't like whole life insurance, the number one area of buyer's remorse is right here, the first year. First year is the worst year. I pay in $100K. In this example, I've got negative $18,000 no matter how I slice it. Like that's a negative hit. Now, again, the worst year is the first year. The best year is every year after the first year. So now I pay in 100 grand again. I almost get that 100K back. So I paid in 100. It grew from 82 to 180. So I got just about $98,000 back. I pay in 100K again, grows from 180 to 280. Next year, 180 to 388. So I get my 100K back plus another 8K. The compounding continues, gets better and better each year. By year 5, I've paid in 500 and I have 500. See what's going on? Pay it through year 10, 0 thereafter. I never pay another penny into it, and your cash value continues to grow. Same thing with the death benefit over time. And if I'm explaining this to a client that really wants to go deep, I'll explain what each column means and really go into detail there, because some people really like that. But again, that's my favorite thing to do, and it's really my background, going through all of the nitty-gritty with the whole life insurance policy, which not everyone likes that either. So sometimes I have to tell myself, Steve, cool off. Not everyone likes that. There's one individual we work with. I really like working with him. His name's Tori, and he's said to me, he's like, Steve, you talk to me as if you're training an agent on the small details of a life insurance policy. He's like, I don't care about that. He's like, just tell me how much I got to pay in and how much money I'm going to have at a certain age. And I actually appreciate that kind of feedback when working with individuals, because they tell me, Steve, cool off. And that's part of me where it's like I go back and think, hey, what if I don't communicate this effectively? Let me make sure I'm very, very thorough, because I want to take it with the utmost care. It's important to do that kind of stuff. But then, you got to compensate and balance that out. So my point there, practice, practice, practice. I started with something, the congregation, that I would always practice those talks. I still do anytime I have a public talk, even though I've given it many times in the past. I'll practice it between 3 to 6 times to really help with that delivery, to make sure it's smooth because it's important, the kind of message you're delivering there. So then thought, okay, take that same practice, that same skill refinery to say, okay, if you want that perfect or to be as good as you can get it, do the same thing with your business. Practice. Take the time. Don't say, Steve, I don't have the time. Take the time. Practice. That is what sets apart the superstar producers from the people that don't make it or just mediocre, or the complainers that just complain about their competition all the time, saying, oh, they're no good. Let me say everything bad. No, it's because they don't take the time to practice and their competition does. That's usually the case, and I've seen that to be so the truth in so many industries. So step number 1, practice. The second thing I did was get people to talk to, leads. I connected with these 2 guys out in the Midwest named Nick Drzajic, sorry, Nick, if you're watching this, and then Jake Thompson. He's got a much easier last name. Jake's dad is actually Dan Thompson, whom we don't work with. I've never worked with him at all. I've talked to him probably 3 or 4 times in my life, just here and there, but we don't work together, never did. I only mention him because he's in the same space, high cash value life insurance, how it works, all that good stuff. But Nick and Jake, or Jake and Nick, I forget what I would always say, but they sent us leads. First, it was an agreement, and it still is an agreement where we help them with their marketing cost, but they sent me leads, worked the leads one-on-one, ran I don't know how many thousands of meetings, typically go-to meetings, one-on-one with people, explaining how whole life insurance works, how to maximize the cash value, how loans work, answering really all the questions that they have. When I first worked with Nick and Jake, their marketing heavily revolved around the idea of the banking concept. That was back then, and they still do that a little bit today. But what was interesting is every time someone would come across that website, they were interested in the banking concept and cash value life insurance. I would always ask the question, from your research so far, Mr. and Mrs. Prospect, do you have more questions, or do you have any questions around the idea of the banking concept, or would you like more information around whole life insurance, how that works? Almost every time it was, I got the concept. I'd like to understand more about the cash value product and how to maximize the cash value. I've been pitched on it before. I don't like it, or I didn't like what I saw. Happens so much in the industry, which really tells me there's a huge opportunity. But step 2, to sum it up, I met with Nick and Jake. They sent activity. That gave me people to talk to. I was practicing, refining my skills. From that point, after a couple years, I began to generate my own leads through content. And then I've got some other partners that I work with as well. My good friend Denzel, Dr. Ace, Max, there's a number of them, which really help us with our business, and I thoroughly appreciate it. All right, so number 1 is practice. Number 2 was getting people to talk to. And number 3, policies for minimum commission. It's the same thing back then that it is today. When we set up policies, they're for minimum commission. And the reason why I do that is not to say I set up policies for minimum commission because I have the true best interest of my clients at heart, because I minimize my commission. That's not why. Why we do it, because I've looked at so many different policy models to see, hey, if I go higher on the base premium, which generates a higher commission for my company, because we do want to drive revenue and remain profitable all the time, is there any way that I can justify that where it's still in the consumer's best interest? And there's times you can manipulate an illustration where it actually displays that. Like, I can put an illustration together that has less cash value up front and more long term. The thing is, that's a load of manure, because of my experience at working at the firm where we design policies for corporations. When you look at what the ultra wealthy do and really focus on that important point I mentioned earlier, actual performance, which no one talks about, when compensation is minimized, and specifically when I've got strong upfront cash values, I see the strongest guaranteed cash values in the illustration, regardless of what those non-guarantees project. Here's what I've seen every single time. When I've got the strongest guaranteed cash values, the strongest actual performance comes true as well, particularly with minimum premium policies with the major mutual companies. Like I've seen it every time. So still the same when we set policies up for minimum commission, like it's still the same today. The big difference is now we generate a lot of volume, which we're very fortunate, and we've got a big company to help service that volume. And then also we do have corporate clients that is still minimum commission, but they're on large deposits. For example, our biggest client is literally a bank, a bank that has made a number of 8-figure deposits. I don't want to say that to brag, but even though the compensation is a minimal rate when it's on a larger amount of money, that does help us sustain from a business model standpoint. And we treat the individual that we work with, if they're paying in 8 figures, 7 figures, 6 figures, whatever, exactly the same as someone who pays in $200 per month. You know why? My first policy was $200 per month. I still have that policy. I think it was a little bit less actually because I couldn't afford anything else. That's the honest truth. So I never want to treat anyone different. Every single time I'm in a sales meeting or one of our agents are, like what I want everyone at our company to think, and I try and do this with everyone, is the person I'm talking to, what if it was me? What if I'm them? Is that policy really set up in their best interest, not mine as the agent? Anytime a policy is shown with a high commission rate or say, hey, let's go a little bit higher there, I can't do it. Like I won't be able to sleep at night. I've had agents that have worked with our company that says, hey, we're doing a lot of work. Doesn't it make sense to go a little bit higher on the compensation for ourselves? I'm like, no, it's their money. What if you requested a high cash value product and someone sold you something else? How would you feel there? So I know that was a lot today. I hope that you enjoyed some of it. I hope you were able to pick up some tidbits, really touching on the point as far as why there is so much misinformation in the industry with respect to whole life insurance, why people love it, why people hate it. If I were to summarize it, really misinformation, because products can be designed in so many different ways, but then the compensation as well. Like that's the big thing. Misinformation, you can call it improper training, lack of training, and then motives with compensation. So, hope you enjoyed this. Thank you so much. I'll talk to you soon. Hey guys, Steve Parisi here. If you enjoyed the content you just saw, please subscribe, like, and hit the notification bell for future videos. If you'd like more information or to see some custom policies for yourself, feel free to call or email our offices at the contact information below.